Hey, welcome back. If you're new here, this is Sleepy Science, a place where we take the biggest, most remarkable stories that science and history have ever given us, and we tell them slowly, quietly, in a way that lets you stop carrying the weight of the day and just drift. Before we begin, a quick word. If these videos have given you something, a few hours of calm, a night of better sleep, a reason to finally let go, consider leaving a like or a comment down below. Even just the word moon, so I know you were here. It genuinely helps more than you know. And if you want to help keep this channel going, there's a Patreon linked in the description. Every contribution helps me keep making these for you, free, for anyone who needs a quiet place to land at the end of a long day. Tonight, we are going to the moon. Not the moon you can see right now from your window, or the one in photographs, or the one that children draw as a crescent in the corner of the sky. We are going to the real one. The ancient, silent, dust-covered world that hangs 238,000 miles above the surface of this planet. We are going to tell the story of three men who left this Earth, crossed the void between worlds, and touched another ground for the very first time in the history of our species. This is Apollo 11. And tonight, we are going to live every quiet, extraordinary moment of it. So wherever you are right now, in your bed, on your couch, curled under something warm, let your body get heavy. Let your shoulders fall. Let your jaw unclench just a little. There is nowhere to be. Nothing to do. Just this. There is a certain kind of moment in history that nobody fully understands while it's happening. People go about their days. They eat breakfast. They argue about small things. They sleep through sunsets. And somewhere in the background, quietly at first, and then with enormous noise, something is being built that will change everything. The story of Apollo 11 doesn't begin in July of 1969. It begins much earlier than that. It begins with a fear. In the autumn of 1957, a small metal sphere was launched into orbit around the Earth by the Soviet Union. It was called Sputnik, which means simply traveler or fellow traveler in Russian. It weighed about 184 pounds. It was roughly the size of a beach ball, and it beeped. Just a simple radio signal, a rhythmic pulse, transmitted from low orbit back to the Earth below. Beep, beep, beep. And yet, that beeping, heard by amateur radio operators in backyards across America, caused something close to panic in the halls of the United States government. Because it meant that another nation had learned how to throw something into space. And if you could put a satellite into orbit, the thinking went, then you could put a weapon there too. The space race had begun. In the months and years that followed, both nations poured resources and talent and urgency into their programs. The Soviets sent the first living creature to orbit, a dog named Laika. Then they sent the first human, a young pilot named Yuri Gagarin, who circled the Earth once on the 12th of April, 1961, and came home forever changed. America was behind, and everyone knew it. Then, on the 25th of May, 1961, a relatively new president stood before Congress and made one of the most audacious promises ever spoken aloud in public. His name was John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and he said, in plain words, that the United States would land a man on the moon and return him safely to the Earth before the decade was out. That's worth sitting with for a moment. At the time that Kennedy spoke those words, the entire combined time that American astronauts had spent in space was 15 minutes. 15 minutes. And he was promising the moon. The engineers and scientists in the audience that day were, by most accounts, terrified. Not because they didn't believe in the goal, but because they understood, better than almost anyone, how impossible it actually was. Nobody knew how to get to the moon. Not really. Not yet. The rocket capable of doing it hadn't been designed. The spacecraft hadn't been built. The navigation systems, the spacesuits, the life support, the landing procedures, none of it existed in anything close to a workable form. What existed was the promise and the will. Over the years that followed, NASA grew from a small, almost improvised agency into one of the largest engineering undertakings in human history. At its peak, more than 400,000 people were working on the Apollo program. Engineers and mathematicians, seamstresses who hand-stitched spacesuits, welders working through the night, computer scientists, many of them women, doing calculations by hand that would later be verified by the earliest digital computers. There were tragedies along the way. In January of 1967, 3 astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, died in a fire during a launch pad test aboard what would have been Apollo 1. The program paused. It grieved. And then it went back to work, because those men had believed in the work, and to stop would have been to waste what they gave. The program tested. It iterated. It learned from every error. Apollo 7 flew with astronauts in October of 1968, testing the command module. Apollo 8, in December of that same year, flew 3 men around the moon and back, the first humans ever to leave the gravitational field of Earth. Astronaut Bill Anders, looking out the window on that flight, took a photograph. A photograph of the Earth, small and blue and luminous, rising above the grey horizon of the moon. Earthrise. It became one of the most famous photographs ever taken. People looked at it and, for perhaps the first time, understood in their bodies what they had only known in their heads, that this small blue planet was the only home any living thing had ever known. Fragile, precious, suspended in black. Apollo 9 tested the lunar module in Earth orbit. Apollo 10 flew the lunar module to within 50,000 feet of the Moon's surface, close enough to see individual rocks on the ground below, before pulling back. A dress rehearsal. And then came Apollo 11, the one that would actually land. Before we go further, you should know something about the three men who went. Not the heroic versions of them, the ones carved from marble in the public imagination. The real ones. The first is Neil Alden Armstrong. Armstrong was born in Wapakoneta, Ohio, on the 5th of August, 1930. He was a quiet child, the kind who read everything he could get his hands on, and who seemed, even then, to exist slightly apart from the ordinary noise of the world. He became fascinated by flight very early. He got his student pilot's license before he had his driver's license, which tells you something about where his priorities lay. He flew in the Korean War, completed 78 combat missions, and once had to eject from a damaged plane over enemy territory. He landed in a tree. He went back to base the next morning for breakfast. That was Neil Armstrong. After the war, he became a test pilot, one of the best in the country, flying experimental aircraft to the edges of the atmosphere. He flew the X-15 rocket plane to altitudes high enough that he crossed the boundary where the sky becomes space. He understood speed and altitude and danger, the way most people understand the street they grew up on. He was not a man given to drama. He was private. He chose his words carefully, which is part of why the words he eventually chose, standing on another world, became the ones they did. The second is Edwin Eugene Aldrin Jr., who went by Buzz. Buzz Aldrin was born in Montclair, New Jersey, in January of 1930. He was, by almost every account, a different kind of person than Armstrong. Louder, more expressive, more visibly caught up in the enormity of what they were doing. He was the son of an Army Air Corps officer, and he followed his father into aviation and then beyond. He had a doctorate from MIT in orbital mechanics, which is perhaps the most useful possible degree to have if you are going to the moon. He understood, better than most, exactly what it would take to get there and come back. Aldrin had flown in Korea as well, logging 66 combat missions. He was, in the language of the test pilot community, precise. Someone who trusted data and calculation over intuition, which was exactly the kind of mind a mission like this needed. He was also, as the world would later come to understand, carrying a complicated interior life. A man who would struggle after the mission with the weight of having been somewhere no human had ever been, and then having to come home and explain it. But that comes later. The third is Michael Collins. Collins was born in Rome, Italy, in October of 1930. He was the son of a US Army officer and spent his childhood moving from place to place, never entirely rooted anywhere. He became a military pilot, a test pilot, and eventually an astronaut. Collins would not land on the moon. His role was to fly the command module, named Columbia, and to wait in orbit, while Armstrong and Aldrin descended to the surface. This fact, the waiting, the orbiting alone around a foreign world, has made Collins in many ways the most quietly compelling figure in the story. He once wrote that when he was on the far side of the moon, cut off from radio contact with Earth, passing through the most total darkness he had ever experienced, he felt not lonely, but aware. Aware that he was a single human being in an immensity of space, with his two crewmates somewhere on the surface of a world below, and 3 billion people on the planet he'd left behind, and nothing else. Just him, and the machine that held him, and the dark. These were the 3 men. Not untouchable. Not made of different material than anyone else. Just men, exceptionally trained and deeply committed, who were given an extraordinary job and decided to do it. To understand what Apollo 11 was, you have to understand what carried them. The Saturn V rocket. And I want you to try, even now as you lie here in the quiet, to hold in your mind what this vehicle actually was. It was 363 feet tall. To give that some sense, if you stood it next to the Statue of Liberty, the rocket would be taller. If you placed it next to a 30-story building, the rocket would overtop it. It weighed 6 million pounds fully fueled. Most of that weight was propellant, liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, a refined form of kerosene called RP1. It was essentially a controlled explosion pointed at the sky. The first stage alone held 5 engines, each one the size of a small house, each one capable of producing 1.5 million pounds of thrust. Together, those 5 engines produced more power at liftoff than the combined output of all the power plants in the United Kingdom at the time. The engineers who built it called it the vehicle. Not the rocket. The vehicle. Like it deserved something closer to reverence. Wernher von Braun was the chief architect of the Saturn V, a German-born rocket engineer who had, in a chapter of his life he did not speak about easily, worked on rocket technology for Germany during World War II. He surrendered to American forces in 1945 and was brought to the United States as part of a classified program where his expertise was considered too valuable to ignore. Von Braun had dreamed of spaceflight his entire life. He once said that his dream, from boyhood, was to stand on the surface of Mars. The moon, for him, was not the destination. The moon was the first step. He designed the Saturn V with a kind of fierce precision, insisting on levels of quality control and redundancy that some called excessive. Every single part, he argued, had to be reliable. Because failure in space, at those distances, at those velocities, would not be correctable. The Saturn V flew 13 times. It never once failed to deliver its payload to the correct trajectory. Not once. But let's also hold in mind what sat atop that extraordinary machine. The Apollo spacecraft was, in the most reductive terms, 3 pieces. First, the command module, where the crew lived and worked during the journey. Roughly cone-shaped, about 13 feet wide at the base, with just enough room for 3 people to exist in something less than comfort. The walls were lined with switches and gauges and readouts. There was something like 800 switches in the command module, roughly 300 dials, dozens of circuit breakers. The astronauts had to know every one of them. Second, the service module, the cylindrical section attached to the back of the command module, containing the main engine, fuel cells, oxygen tanks, and the various systems that kept the spacecraft alive and moving. Third, the Lunar module, the oddest-looking piece of hardware ever flown in space. The Lunar module, named Eagle for Apollo 11, looked less like a spacecraft and more like some kind of oversized, insect-like contraption, assembled from aluminum foil and gold tape and fragile hope. It was designed with exactly one purpose in mind: to land on the moon and get back into orbit. Nothing else. It didn't need to be aerodynamic, because there was no air on the moon to push against. It didn't need to look strong, because it only had to survive a brief, controlled descent and a single launch. The lunar module's walls were so thin, in some places just the thickness of a few sheets of paper, that a tool dropped against them could puncture the hull. Everything that could be heavy had been removed. Everything that could be made lighter had been. Even the seats had been taken out, because seats were weight, and weight was death on the margins of this mission. Armstrong and Aldrin would descend to the moon standing up. July 16th, 1969. The day began before the sun. All 3 astronauts were awake by 4:30 in the morning. They ate what was described as a traditional astronaut breakfast: steak and eggs. They were medically examined. They dressed in their spacesuits, a process that took over an hour and required assistance from a team of technicians. Outside, the night was still thick and warm. The Florida summer pressing against the launch complex at Kennedy Space Center. The Saturn V had been fueled overnight, and in the darkness it breathed out long white plumes of condensation as the super-cold liquid oxygen met the humid night air. Hundreds of thousands of people had come to watch. Not just to the VIP grandstands, but to every stretch of beach and highway and empty field within miles of the launch site. They came in camper vans and on motorcycles, and in old sedans packed with children and folding chairs. They came because they understood, somehow, that this was not something you could watch from home and tell yourself later that you'd been there. At the top of the rocket, 3 men rode an elevator to a height of 200 feet, and then walked, one by one, across a narrow gantry bridge to the spacecraft. Armstrong went first. He climbed through the hatch, was helped into his seat on the left side of the command module, and lay back into the familiar contour of the couch. he looked up through the small window and saw only sky. Collins climbed in next, taking the right seat. Aldrin came last, settling into the center. The hatch was sealed. They had 2 hours and 32 minutes to wait. Let's stay in that waiting for a moment. 2 hours and 32 minutes is a long time to lie in a small machine, knowing that underneath you, 3 stories below your back, more than 2,000 tons of highly explosive liquid propellant is waiting to be ignited. The checklists kept them busy. There were hundreds of items to verify, hundreds of switches to confirm, a whole architecture of preparation that had to be completed before anyone was going anywhere. In Mission Control in Houston, nearly 500 people sat at consoles, each responsible for a different system, each listening to their own stream of data. The room was famously calm. There was almost no noise beyond the low murmur of communication. Flight Director Gene Kranz walked his team through a final status check. One by one, each flight controller gave the same quiet word: go. 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 At 9:32 in the morning, Eastern Daylight Time, the launch sequence entered its final seconds. At minus 8.9 seconds, the ignition sequence began. The 5 first-stage engines ignited, not all at once, but in sequence, in a controlled stagger over a fraction of a second. The ground shook for miles around. The sound was not so much heard as felt. In the chest, in the teeth, in the fluid of the inner ear. For a long moment, nothing seemed to move. The 4 hold-down clamps at the base of the rocket held it against the pull of its own fire, until the engines had built to full thrust. Then the clamps released, and the Saturn V began to rise. Slowly at first. Impossibly slowly for something producing that much power. Because it was so heavy, 6 million pounds of metal and fuel and human ambition, lifting against the pull of the Earth 1 foot at a time. The crowds watching from the beaches screamed. Some wept. Many had their eyes covered with their hands and were peering through their fingers as if the brightness of it was too much to look at directly. Inside the command module, the crew felt it as vibration first, then as acceleration, pressing them back into their couches with a steady and increasing force. Collins later described the sensation as being like riding an express elevator, but with a trembling quality underneath, as if the whole machine were barely containing itself. Armstrong watched the altitude increase on his instruments and spoke calmly to Mission Control. 12 seconds after liftoff, the Saturn V performed a slow, programmed roll that oriented it on the correct heading for its orbital insertion. 2.5 minutes after liftoff, traveling at over 6,000 miles per hour, the first stage burned out and separated. A ring of explosive bolts fired, and the empty first stage fell away behind them, tumbling back toward the Atlantic Ocean far below. The second stage ignited. Then it too separated. The third stage carried them the rest of the way to orbit, and Apollo 11 arrived in Earth orbit 12 minutes after liftoff, traveling at approximately 17,500 miles per hour. They circled the Earth for an hour and 44 minutes. During this time, the crew and mission control verified all systems. Everything was checked. Everything confirmed. And then, on the second orbit, came the burn that would change everything. The translunar injection burn. The third stage engine lit again, burning for 5 minutes and 47 seconds, accelerating the spacecraft from orbital velocity to a speed just barely sufficient to escape the gravitational field of the Earth. When the engine shut down, Apollo 11 was traveling at 24,231 miles per hour, and it was aimed at a point in space where the Moon would be, 3 days hence. The Earth fell away behind them. I want you to imagine 3 days in space. Not the dramatic action movie version. Not explosions and alarms. Just the reality of it. 3 men in a spacecraft roughly the size of a mid-size car's interior, crossing 238,000 miles of absolute nothing. No sound outside. No friction. No weather. No color except black, and occasionally, when they looked out their windows, the white-blue curve of the diminishing Earth, and the hard, brilliant stars that don't twinkle in space the way they do when seen through atmosphere. They slept in shifts. The sleeping arrangements were, by any earthly standard, awful. 3 people sharing a space smaller than most walk-in closets, with no gravity to settle the body into anything like a natural resting position. You could wedge yourself against a couch. You could float in a sleeping bag strapped to a wall. You could put in earplugs against the constant hum of the spacecraft's systems. But real, deep, restorative sleep was elusive. They ate food from packages, most of it rehydrated with a water gun. The menu included things like shrimp cocktail, beef stew, butterscotch pudding, and a variety of items that tasted, by most accounts, like they had been through a war before being packed into foil pouches. They did housekeeping, checked systems, tracked navigation, performed a mid-course correction burn early in the flight to refine their trajectory. And they looked out the windows. Collins later wrote about the Earth receding as the mission progressed. On the first day, it filled the window. By the second day, it had shrunk to something you could cover with your thumb. By the third, it was a marble, blue and white and impossibly beautiful, hanging in nothing. He wrote that it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. And also, somehow, the most lonely. There is a moment in every translunar mission, at a specific point in space, where the gravitational pull of the Earth and the gravitational pull of the Moon are exactly equal. Before that point, you are, technically, gravitationally, still being held by Earth. After it, you belong to the Moon. The crews called it the handoff point. There was no sensation when you crossed it. The spacecraft didn't shudder. No alarm sounded. The stars didn't shift. But the numbers on the navigation display changed. And the crew knew. They were in lunar space now. Apollo 11 crossed this point approximately 33 hours into the mission. On the third day, the moon filled the windows. Not the silver coin moon they had known from Earth. A different moon. Enormous. Grey and stark and scarred, covered in craters of every size, their shadows impossibly sharp in the vacuum's unfiltered sunlight. Collins called it a withered, sun-seared peach pit. Not complimentary, but accurate. As they approached, the spacecraft was placed in a slow rotation. The barbecue roll, the astronauts called it. A gentle, continuous spin that evenly distributed the heat of the sun across the craft's surface and prevented any one side from overheating. In this slow rotation, the view from the windows alternated between the moon, the sun, the stars, the receding Earth, over and over. Stars. Moon. Sunday. Earth. Stars. Moon. Sunday. Earth. And on the third day, Apollo 11 was captured by lunar gravity, entered lunar orbit, and became the first crewed spacecraft ever to circle the moon, with the intention of landing. Lunar orbit. Say those two words slowly. Lunar orbit. To be in orbit around the moon means to be traveling fast enough and at the right altitude that your forward speed and the moon's gravitational pull balance perfectly, and you fall around it endlessly, rather than falling into it or flying away from it. Apollo 11 entered this orbit on the afternoon of the 19th of July. The crew spent the next 24 hours preparing. They mapped the surface below. They photographed the landing site from orbit, a flat plain in the Sea of Tranquility that NASA had identified as the safest, most accessible patch of ground on the moon's near side. The Sea of Tranquility is not, of course, a sea. There is no water on the moon, no weather, no erosion. The name is a remnant of earlier astronomy, when early telescopic observers looked at the dark, relatively smooth volcanic plains, and imagined they were looking at a body of water. What they are, in reality, are ancient lava flows, plains of basaltic rock, frozen in place billions of years ago, when the moon was still geologically active. From orbit, in the harsh, unfiltered sunlight, the landing site looked flat enough to be safe. But the orbital photographs were taken at an angle that compressed the terrain, and the actual ground, as they would discover, was not quite as smooth as the photographs implied. Armstrong and Aldrin crawled through the tunnel between the command module and the lunar module, and began powering up the Eagle. This was delicate work. The lunar module had been essentially dormant for 3 days, folded into the top of the spacecraft like a folded insect, its systems cold and unactivated. Every switch thrown, Every system brought online had to be cross-checked against the checklist and confirmed with mission control. Collins remained in Columbia, checking his own systems, preparing for the separation. There was a moment, right before they undocked, where Collins reached through the tunnel hatch and gave the Eagle's hatch a gentle push, just to confirm the seal. It held. He sealed his side. And then the three men who had been together for 3 days and 360,000 miles became two groups. Two below. One alone. "You cats take care," Collins said on the intercom. "See you later," Aldrin replied. The latches released. Eagle drifted free. The descent to the surface of the moon took approximately 12 minutes. 12 minutes during which everything that could go wrong almost did. The powered descent initiation, the moment the descent engine ignited and they began actively braking toward the surface, occurred when Eagle was about 50,000 feet above the ground. Armstrong and Aldrin were standing at their stations, feet pressed into foot restraints on the floor, hands on the controls, eyes scanning their displays. For the first several minutes, the descent went exactly as planned. Then the alarms started. At about 33,000 feet, the navigation computer displayed a code that neither Armstrong nor Aldrin had ever seen in training. 1202. Armstrong called it out to Mission Control. In Mission Control, the silence that followed lasted 3 seconds. In the context of landing on the moon, 3 seconds is a long time. A 26-year-old guidance officer named Jack Garman, who had prepared a handwritten crib sheet of all possible alarm codes, recognized it instantly. The alarm meant the computer was overloaded, receiving more data than it could process. But it had a critical safeguard built in. Rather than failing, it was dumping lower priority tasks and restarting itself, focusing only on what was essential for the descent. "Go," said Flight Controller Steve Bales, leaning on Garman's input. "Go," said Flight Director Gene Kranz. "Go," said Mission Control. And they kept descending. The alarm came back. Then again. Each time, the same answer. Go. At about 3,000 feet, Armstrong looked through the landing window and saw the terrain below. And his stomach dropped. The computer was guiding them toward a crater the size of a football field, its rim littered with boulders as large as cars. Nothing had survived a landing there. Armstrong switched from the automatic guidance system to semi-automatic control, which meant he was now flying. He flew the lunar module horizontally across the surface, burning precious fuel, looking for somewhere flat enough and clear enough to set down. Below him, the craters kept coming. In Mission Control, the fuel status displays were being watched with increasing anxiety. At 60 seconds of fuel remaining, the capsule communicator read out the call-out. 60 seconds. 60 seconds until they would have to abort and fire the ascent engine. or risk running out of fuel on the surface and never getting back up. Armstrong kept flying. In the cramped module, Aldrin read the altitude and descent rate in a calm, steady voice. Not a voice that sounded frightened. Not a voice that betrayed anything. A voice that sounded like a man doing his job. 200 feet, 4.5 down. Forward. Forward. 30 seconds. 30 seconds of fuel. Armstrong saw a clear patch ahead and to the left. A small, relatively flat area just beyond the boulder field. He aimed for it. Below the landing legs, the descent engine was kicking up a thin sheet of lunar dust that spread out in all directions like a ghost. Not a cloud, because there was no air to hold it up, but a flat, streaking blanket of particles moving outward at high speed, obscuring the ground and making it impossible to tell exactly when they would touch. Contact light. A blue light on the instrument panel. The probes extending from the landing legs had touched the lunar surface. Armstrong cut the engine. Eagle dropped the final few feet and landed with a gentle thud. There was a moment of quiet that lasted perhaps 2 seconds. Then Armstrong spoke to Mission Control in a voice that was so calm it almost didn't register at first what he was actually saying. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. In Mission Control, Gene Kranz pressed his hands flat on his console and kept his composure. Just barely. Capsule communicator Charlie Duke's voice broke, just slightly, when he replied, "Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again." The Eagle had 17 seconds of fuel remaining. There was supposed to be a rest period after landing. A sleep cycle. The original flight plan called for Armstrong and Aldrin to sleep for several hours after touchdown before attempting the moonwalk. Neither man had any interest in that plan. Armstrong quietly asked Mission Control if they could skip the rest period and proceed with the EVA, the extravehicular activity, the walk on the surface. Mission Control considered and agreed. What followed was several hours of preparation. Donning the spacesuits in the cramped confines of the lunar module, checking and rechecking every seal, every connection, every fitting. The spacesuits were, in their own way, as extraordinary as the spacecraft. Each suit was essentially a personal spacecraft. It maintained pressure against the vacuum. It regulated temperature against extremes that ranged from 250 degrees Fahrenheit in direct sunlight to minus 250 degrees in shadow. It supplied oxygen. It removed carbon dioxide. It accommodated the waste of the human body. It protected against micrometeorites. And it had to let the wearer walk. Each suit was sewn from 21 distinct layers of material, including Teflon-coated beta cloth on the exterior, layers of aluminized mylar for thermal protection, nylon ripstop, and an inner pressure garment that functioned like a balloon against the vacuum. Seamstresses at the International Latex Corporation in Dover, Delaware, the company better known as Playtex, the maker of everyday bras and girdles, had sewn these suits largely by hand, tolerances of 35 thousandths of an inch, because a sewing machine couldn't manage the precision required. Each seamstress's work was known to the quality control team, each stitch accountable to a name. Armstrong and Aldrin put on their portable life support systems, the backpacks that contained their oxygen and cooling water, and depressurized the cabin. Armstrong got down on his hands and knees on the floor of the lunar module and backed out through the hatch. The hatch was small, 3 feet wide and less than 2 feet tall. Getting through it in a pressurized suit required patience and flexibility and a kind of Tetris-like contortion that Armstrong had rehearsed many times in training. He eased onto the small platform outside the hatch, then reached back and pulled a release cord that deployed a folding equipment shelf on the side of the descent stage. This shelf contained the equipment that would be used on the surface. But it also contained the television camera, already aimed at the ladder, already transmitting to a receiving station in Australia, already carrying to Earth a grainy, black and white image of an astronaut at the top of a ladder, on the surface of the moon. Armstrong climbed down 9 rungs, reached the bottom rung, and paused. He looked at the surface below him. The first human being in history to stand within reach of the ground of another world. He stepped off the pad and said, in that careful, considered voice of his, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." The line he had intended was, one small step for a man. The single article that would have distinguished his step from humanity's step. The transmission from the moon, crossing 238,000 miles of space, dropped it. It scarcely mattered. 600 million people watching on television understood exactly what was happening. Neil Armstrong was on the moon. The surface was unexpected. Armstrong later described it as fine-grained, almost powdery, like wet sand, but lighter. He pressed his boot down and watched the print form perfectly, each tread lug preserved in exquisite clarity in the vacuum. No wind to blur it. No rain to wash it. That print, the first human boot print on the moon, is still there. It will be there in 1,000 years. In 10,000. In 1,000,000. The only thing that will eventually erode it is the slow sandblasting of micrometeorites, falling at the rate of a few per square meter per 100 years. By that measure, the print will survive for perhaps hundreds of millions of years before it finally fades. He called the color of the surface surprising. He had expected gray. What he saw, in the low angle of the sun, was a surface that shifted from tan to gray to almost golden depending on the direction he looked. He took the first photos, panned slowly around, recording the horizon in all directions. Flat in every direction but subtly undulating, like a sea that had frozen mid-ripple. Craters of all sizes, some shallow and worn down by eons of micrometeorite gardening, some sharp and raw looking. No color, no sky. Just black above, gray below, and the blinding white of the sun in a sky without atmosphere to scatter its light. He could see the Earth, not rising, the way it appears in photos taken from lunar orbit. Simply there, hanging in the same spot in the black sky, because from the surface of the near side of the moon, the Earth doesn't rise or set. It stays in roughly the same position in the sky as the moon rotates under it over its month-long day. A blue and white sphere, brilliant against the black. He called it beautiful. 19 minutes after Armstrong stepped off the ladder, Buzz Aldrin descended. He stepped onto the surface, looked around for a long moment, and said, "Magnificent desolation." 2 words. Chosen or spontaneous or somewhere between, but exactly right. The surface was magnificent. The sheer, overwhelming fact of being on another world, of standing on ground that no living thing had ever touched, of being the second and third human beings in history to do so, that was magnificent. And it was utterly, absolutely desolate. No life. No possibility of life. Nothing soft, or growing, or moving, except for 2 men in white suits who had brought their own oxygen, and were standing on a plain of ancient rock, 238,000 miles from the nearest anything. Armstrong and Aldrin worked through their checklist. They planted a flag, an American flag, with a rigid horizontal rod sewn along the top to hold it extended in the vacuum, because there was no wind to unfurl it. They received a phone call. President Richard Nixon had been connected via radio from the White House. He told them it was the most historic phone call ever made from the White House. He told them all of America was proud of them. All humanity was proud of them. Armstrong thanked him. They got back to work. They collected rock samples, 47 pounds of them, stuffed into sample return containers. Rocks that had been sitting undisturbed on the lunar surface for billions of years, some of them as old as the solar system itself. They deployed a small science station, a seismometer to detect moonquakes, a laser reflector to allow precise measurements of the Earth-Moon distance, a solar wind experiment to capture particles from the sun. They moved around the surface with a slightly awkward, bounding gait, not the confident stride of a person walking on Earth, but something in between hopping and walking, using the reduced gravity of the Moon, which is 1/6 that of Earth, to their advantage. A person who weighs 180 pounds on Earth weighs 30 pounds on the Moon. The bulk of the suit and equipment, which would have been exhausting to carry on Earth, was manageable. They walked several hundred feet from the landing site to the rim of the small crater they had identified during descent. They photographed it. They looked in. Rocks on the floor below. Old, old rocks. They went back to the lunar module. After 2 hours and 31 minutes on the surface, the moonwalk was over. Before they left the surface, Armstrong and Aldrin left several things behind. Some were practical. They threw out bags of equipment and waste, reducing the weight of the lunar module for the ascent. They discarded their portable life support backpacks, which were no longer needed. But some of what was left behind was intentional and symbolic. They left a commemorative plaque fixed to the descent stage of the lunar module, which would remain on the surface forever. It reads, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 A.D. We came in peace for all mankind." They left a small silicon disc, the size of a 50-cent piece, containing microscopic messages from 73 world leaders. They left a patch from the Apollo 1 spacecraft, in memory of Grissom, White, and Chaffee. They left medals honoring 2 Soviet cosmonauts who had died in training accidents, Yuri Gagarin and Vladimir Komarov. In the middle of the space race, Armstrong and Aldrin placed their rivals' honors on the ground of another world, because those men had also died in the pursuit of the same thing. They also left, though this wasn't in the official checklist, a small gold olive branch pin that had been a kind of good luck token carried quietly by Armstrong. On the surface of the moon, these objects remain: the plaque, the disc, the medals, the olive branch, the boot prints. There is no more silent or undisturbed archive anywhere in the known universe. While Armstrong and Aldrin were on the surface, Michael Collins was flying alone above them. Every 2 hours, Columbia completed one orbit of the moon. For roughly 45 minutes of each orbit, Collins was on the far side of the moon, completely out of contact with the Earth. No radio, no news, no voice from Houston. He couldn't even see the landing site from orbit. He was, at the moments of greatest disconnection, the most isolated human being in history. At the time Armstrong and Aldrin were on the surface, there were slightly over 3.5 billion people on Earth. 2 of them were on the moon. Every other human being alive was either on the planet below or in the Columbia spacecraft. All of them. Every person. Except Collins. He wrote later about the experience of passing through the dark side of the moon. The sun was behind the moon when you were on the far side, so there was no reflected light at all. The stars were there, brilliant and unwavering, as they always were in space. But the moon itself was a black shape, an absence of stars, filling half the sky with nothing. He was not frightened. He said he felt, in those moments alone, that he was privileged. That to have been given this view, this experience, this particular vantage on the universe, was not a punishment or a loss, even though he was the one who didn't land, but something like a gift. He said he felt it keenly, the aloneness was part of it. What he missed most, by his account, wasn't human contact. It was music. He had brought no music aboard. There was no stereo in Columbia. There was the radio hiss of dead air on the far side, and the hum of the spacecraft's systems, and the sound of his own breathing inside the suit when he wore it. That was all. He thought about this later and said that if he'd had one wish for the mission, it would have been music. Something human to fill the quiet. The ascent from the moon was the single most dangerous moment of the entire mission. Not the launch from Earth, not the landing, not the re-entry. The ascent. Here is why. The ascent engine in the lunar module had one purpose, and one purpose only: to fire once and lift the crew from the surface of the moon into orbit. It had no backup. There was no redundant engine. There was no second chance. There was a single engine with a single valve that had to open when commanded. If the engine failed to ignite, Armstrong and Aldrin would remain on the surface of the moon. They would live for as long as their life support systems functioned. Approximately 4 hours. Mission Control had, quietly and without discussing it with the crew, prepared a plan for this outcome. President Nixon's speechwriter, William Safire, had written a speech for Nixon to deliver in the event that the crew did not return. It began, "Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace." That speech existed in a drawer somewhere, undelivered. At 17 hours and 21 minutes after landing, Armstrong threw the switch. The ascent engine fired. The descent stage, which served as the launch pad, remained on the surface. The ascent stage lifted off it on a column of fire, accelerating from 0 to nearly 4,000 miles per hour in under 7 minutes. A camera left on the surface tracked them as they rose. The footage shows the ascent stage lifting off smoothly, climbing into the black sky above the grey plain of the Sea of Tranquility, growing smaller until it disappeared. Then just the landscape. Still. Quiet. Empty. The American flag they'd planted, caught in the exhaust of the ascent engine, lay flat on the ground. The rendezvous and docking with Columbia was one of the most precise operations of the entire mission. The ascent stage, rising from the surface, had to catch a spacecraft orbiting at approximately 3,700 miles per hour. This is not done by pointing at the target and flying toward it. Space rendezvous is counterintuitive in the extreme. To catch a spacecraft ahead of you in orbit, you don't accelerate. You slow down. Slowing down drops you into a lower orbit, and objects in lower orbits travel faster and lap the higher ones. The mathematics involved are elegant and unforgiving, and Buzz Aldrin understood them better than almost anyone alive. His doctoral thesis at MIT had been on this very subject: line-of-sight guidance techniques for orbital rendezvous. He had written the textbook, literally, on how to do this. 3.5 hours after liftoff from the lunar surface, the ascent stage of Eagle closed to within a few hundred feet of Columbia. Collins, who had been watching the approach on his radar, through his window, with an anxious focus he hadn't allowed himself during the entire mission, saw the small, spidery shape of the Eagle drifting toward him across the black sky. The docking probe extended. The latches engaged. Lock. Collins later said it was the best moment of the entire mission for him. Better than the launch. Better than arriving at the moon. Watching his two crewmates come back to him across the void. The hatch between the two spacecraft opened. Armstrong and Aldrin floated through, bringing with them the sample boxes and the film cassettes and the data from the science experiments, and also the smell of the moon. The dust they had tracked in on their suits had a distinctive smell. Sharp, slightly acrid, like gunpowder or burnt matches. Collins wrinkled his nose at it. Armstrong said it was the smell of the moon. Collins said it smelled like a fireplace. Whatever it was the first time the smell of another world had ever entered a spacecraft, ever been inhaled by a human being. The three men who'd been separated for the most consequential 21 hours in the history of exploration were together again. They jettisoned the ascent stage of Eagle, which was placed on a trajectory that would eventually bring it down onto the lunar surface. The exact impact site was never confirmed. Somewhere on the moon, in a crater no one has yet identified, the Eagle rests. The journey back to Earth was 3 days, almost the mirror of the journey out. But something had changed. Not in the spacecraft. Not in the mission parameters. In the three men. Armstrong was quieter than usual, which was itself unusual given that he was already one of the quietest men in the astronaut corps. Collins described him as introspective, withdrawn in the way that people withdraw when they are trying to process something that exceeds their existing categories. Aldrin was, if possible, even more deeply affected. He later wrote about this journey home as the beginning of a long, difficult period in his life, a creeping sense of purposelessness, at the idea of having done the thing he had prepared his entire life to do, and not knowing what came next. Collins seemed, of the three, the most settled. He had his music in his head. He worked his crossword puzzles. He kept his logs. He looked out the window and watched the Earth grow larger. They made a course correction burn on the second day. They ate their foil pouch meals. They slept in shifts. And slowly, the blue marble ahead of them grew into a hemisphere, and then a globe, and then, on the morning of the 24th of July, it was a wall of atmosphere and ocean rushing up to meet them. The command module separated from the service module as planned. The service module, which had served them faithfully for 8 days, tumbled away into space and was never recovered. The command module turned itself heat shield down, The heat shield was an ablative surface, a specially engineered material designed to absorb and carry away the enormous thermal energy of re-entry by burning off in a controlled way, charring and flaking away to carry the heat with it. At the entry interface, the arbitrary boundary, about 400,000 feet above the Earth's surface, where the atmosphere is dense enough to matter, Columbia was traveling at approximately 24,000 miles per hour. Over the next 13 minutes, the atmosphere would slow it to zero. The deceleration forces reached 7 times the force of gravity. The air ahead of the heat shield was compressed so violently it became plasma, the fourth state of matter, hotter than the surface of the sun. A sheath of fire surrounded the spacecraft. Inside, the crew experienced the glow even through the small windows. A brilliant, shifting orange-pink light that filled the capsule. For approximately 3 minutes during peak heating, radio communication was completely blocked. Mission Control could not reach the crew. The crew could not reach Mission Control. There was only fire and the sound of the atmosphere against the capsule and the pressing, heavy weight of deceleration and the faith that the heat shield would hold. It held. At 40,000 feet, the drogue parachutes deployed, slowing the capsule and stabilizing it. At 10,000 feet, the 3 main parachutes deployed. Their descent slowed to 22 miles per hour. And at 12:24 in the afternoon, Pacific Daylight Time, on the 24th of July, 1969, Apollo 11 splashed down in the Pacific Ocean, approximately 900 miles southwest of Hawaii. The mission had lasted 8 days, 3 hours, 18 minutes, and 35 seconds. 600 million people watched the moonwalk on television. At the time, the total population of Earth was approximately 3.5 billion. 1 in every 6 human beings alive watched Armstrong step off the ladder. In most of the world, it was the middle of the night or the early hours of the morning when the footage was broadcast. People didn't go to sleep. Bars stayed open past legal closing times because nobody left. Families gathered around single televisions in small rooms, sitting on floors and leaning against walls, watching grainy footage of a man in a white suit moving in slow, deliberate steps across an ash-gray plain. In Tokyo, the streets were empty. In Paris, the same. In Lagos, in Buenos Aires, in Sydney, in Oslo, people sat in the dark and watched the moon. There were places in the world without electricity, without televisions, where people had gathered around radios and listened to voices crackling across the atmosphere, trying to describe what was being seen on the surface of another world. It was, for a moment, the most watched event in human history. More than anything else that had ever been broadcast. More than any war, any coronation, any sporting event. People who were alive for it remember exactly where they were. The way that certain events lodge themselves into memory, because the world before and the world after are never quite the same. A woman in rural Kenya later told an interviewer that she had sat outside her house and looked up at the actual moon in the sky while listening on her radio, and found it impossible to believe that two human beings were standing on that thing, that same moon, the moon she had known her entire life, that hung above her house and her fields and her world. She said she wept. Not from sadness, from the sheer overwhelming size of what it meant. When the 3 astronauts were recovered from the ocean, they were taken aboard the USS Hornet, a Navy aircraft carrier waiting in the splashdown zone. But they did not go free, because nobody knew, with certainty, whether the men might have brought something back from the moon. Not a souvenir. A microbe. The scientific consensus at the time was that the moon was almost certainly sterile. No atmosphere, no liquid water, no plausible mechanism for life. But almost certainly was not the same as certainly. And the consequences of being wrong, of introducing a lunar microorganism to Earth's biosphere, for which no living thing had any immunity, were too catastrophic to dismiss. So the astronauts were placed in quarantine. They were dressed in biological containment garments in their raft in the ocean, before being winched up to the helicopter. They were installed in a modified trailer, the mobile quarantine facility, aboard the Hornet. They stayed there for the voyage to Hawaii, talking to the world through a window. President Nixon came to the ship. He stood outside the quarantine trailer and talked to the 3 men through the glass, visibly moved. Then the trailer was flown to Houston, and the crew spent a total of 21 days in quarantine at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory at the Johnson Space Center. The rock samples they had brought back were also quarantined and tested. No evidence of any biological material was found. The moon, as expected, was sterile. On the 10th of August, 1969, 21 days after splashdown, the quarantine was lifted, and the 3 men were free. The aftermath of Apollo 11 is its own story, and it is not always a happy one. The world tour that followed was extraordinary in scale. 22 countries in 38 days. Massive crowds everywhere. Ticker tape in New York. Speeches before foreign heads of state. But it was also, quietly, a form of dislocation. Armstrong withdrew from public life almost immediately. He resigned from NASA in 1971 and took a teaching position at the University of Cincinnati, where he taught aerospace engineering for 8 years. He refused most interview requests. He gave autographs only reluctantly and stopped almost entirely after he discovered his signature was being resold for profit. He was not bitter. He simply did not feel that what he had done defined what he was. He was an engineer, and a pilot, and then a teacher, and a man who grew corn and soybeans on a farm in Ohio, and built furniture in his workshop, and lived as quiet and ordinary a life as the most extraordinary voyage of the 20th century would allow him to. Buzz Aldrin struggled more openly. He spoke publicly, later in life, about depression and alcoholism, a descent into difficulty that he traced partly to the feeling of purposelessness that followed the mission. He had spent decades preparing for one thing. He had done it. And then he had to figure out what to be in a world that had watched him stand on the moon and would never stop seeing him that way. He recovered. He thrived. Eventually. He wrote books. He advocated tirelessly for space exploration. He became, in his later years, an emblem not just of the achievement, but of the complicated life that follows great achievement. Collins remained, to the end of his long and thoughtful life, the most seemingly at peace with the whole experience. He wrote a memoir, Carrying the Fire, that is widely considered the finest book ever written by an astronaut. In it, he was honest about everything: the fear, the boredom, the loneliness, the extraordinary privilege, the strange feeling of returning to a world that had not changed, but through which you now moved with a permanent sense of having seen something that most people would only ever read about. He died in April of 2021, at the age of 90. A statement from his family said he had died with grace. That seems right for Michael Collins. The 47 pounds of lunar rocks that Armstrong and Aldrin brought back from the Sea of Tranquility turned out to be among the most scientifically valuable samples ever collected. The rocks were old, almost unimaginably old. The youngest rocks from the Apollo 11 landing site were approximately 3.5 billion years old. The oldest, a type of crystalline rock called anorthosite, are over 4 billion years old, formed in the first few 100 million years after the solar system itself came into being. To hold a piece of Apollo 11 lunar rock, which a small number of scientists and heads of state have done, is to hold an object that predates all life on Earth. Before bacteria. Before the oceans stabilized. Before anything we would recognize as part of this world came to exist. The rocks revealed that the moon was formed, most likely by a massive impact. The giant impact hypothesis, which is now the dominant scientific explanation for the moon's origin, proposes that approximately 4.5 billion years ago, the early Earth collided with a planet-sized body, sometimes called Theia. The collision was catastrophic. Both bodies were largely liquefied. The heavier cores merged. The lighter material, mantle rock, silicates, vapor, was flung into orbit around the new, enlarged Earth. Over thousands of years, this debris coalesced. It formed what we see in the sky. The moon. Our moon. Born from the same violence that built the Earth. The Apollo samples also revealed that the lunar surface had been intensely bombarded by meteorites during a period called the Late Heavy Bombardment, roughly 4 billion years ago, when the early solar system was still clearing itself of debris. This same bombardment hit Earth. But on Earth, billions of years of plate tectonics, volcanism, erosion, and biological activity erased almost every trace of it. On the moon, where nothing changes, the record was preserved perfectly. The moon is, among other things, a diary of the early solar system, written in craters, preserved in stone, available to anyone with a rocket and the will to go read it. Let's talk about the moon for a while. Not just as destination, as itself. The moon is 2,159 miles in diameter, about 1/4 the diameter of Earth. It is, in the scale of cosmic things, enormous relative to its parent planet. Most moons in the solar system are tiny compared to the worlds they orbit. Our moon is so large in relation to Earth that some scientists call the Earth-Moon system a double planet rather than a planet and a satellite. The moon's surface gravity is 1/6 that of Earth. A person who weighs 200 pounds on Earth weighs 33 pounds on the moon. There is no atmosphere, no wind, no weather, no rain, no ocean. The temperature at the equator ranges from about 250 degrees Fahrenheit during the lunar day to minus 290 degrees Fahrenheit during the lunar night. The lunar day and night are each about 2 weeks long because the moon rotates once in the same time it takes to orbit the Earth, a phenomenon called tidal locking. That means the same side of the moon always faces us. The far side, the side that Collins flew over alone in the dark, was completely unknown to human beings until a Soviet spacecraft photographed it in 1959. It is rougher than the near side, more heavily cratered, with fewer of the large, smooth lava plains. Nobody is entirely sure why the two sides are so different. It remains one of the open questions in planetary science. The moon is slowly moving away from Earth. Every year, it retreats by approximately 1.5 inches. This is measured precisely using the laser retroreflectors that Apollo 11 left on the surface. The ones you can still bounce lasers off from Earth today, more than 5 decades later, to measure the exact Earth-Moon distance to within a few centimeters. When the moon formed, it was perhaps 10 times closer to Earth than it is now. It would have appeared enormous in the early sky, 10 times larger in diameter than it appears today. A massive, overwhelming presence hanging over the young planet, driving tides that were perhaps 100 meters high, sloshing warm, shallow seas back and forth across the early continents. Some scientists believe those tides, the mixing and churning of chemicals in the early oceans, may have played a role in the emergence of life on Earth. The moon, in other words, may be part of the reason any of us are here to think about it. The moon stabilizes Earth's axial tilt. Without the moon, Earth's tilt, currently 23.5 degrees, would wobble chaotically over time, as Mars's tilt does. Mars has no large moon to stabilize it, and over millions of years its axial tilt has varied dramatically, likely contributing to extreme swings in climate. Earth's stable tilt is what gives us relatively predictable seasons. It is part of what makes this planet habitable. And the moon makes it stable. A quiet, unsung guardian, hanging in the dark above us. The experiments left on the surface of the Moon by Apollo 11 and the missions that followed have been running, in some cases, for over 50 years. The laser retroreflectors are still in use. Observatories around the world, including facilities in France, Germany, Italy, and the United States, regularly bounce laser pulses off the Apollo 11 retroreflector array. The round-trip time of the pulses, measured to nanosecond precision, gives the Earth-Moon distance to within a few millimeters. This data has been used to test Einstein's general theory of relativity, to study the internal structure of the Moon, and to track the slow recession of the Moon from Earth. Every time a laser is bounced off that retroreflector, a small, precisely engineered array of corner-cube prisms, set into a frame and placed on the ground by Buzz Aldrin on the 20th of July, 1969. The science of Apollo 11 continues. The moonquake seismometers operated for years after the missions. They recorded thousands of moonquakes. Not dramatic seismic events like earthquakes on Earth, but small, sustained trembling. Some of it caused by the thermal expansion and contraction of the crust as the surface moved from lunar day into lunar night. Some of it caused by meteorite impacts, and some of it arising from deep within the Moon in ways that are still not fully understood. The recordings of these moonquakes, when converted to audio, sound like nothing on Earth. They ring. Not the sharp crack and rumble of an earthquake, which dies away in minutes. They ring like a bell. For hours. Some moonquakes rang for over an hour before the vibration faded. This is because the Moon is dry. Without water in its rock to absorb vibrational energy, seismic waves bounce around for much longer than they do on Earth. Scientists called the Moon hollow-sounding because of this. Not hollow in the literal sense, but dry and cold and ringing, like a great stone bell struck and left to echo in the silence of space. There are names that belong to this story that very few people know. Margaret Hamilton. She was the director of software engineering for the Apollo program at MIT. She and her team wrote the onboard flight software for the Apollo guidance computers. Software that had to be correct, completely and entirely correct, because there was no mechanism in space to push an update or reboot from a safe location. The software Hamilton's team wrote detected and responded to the 1202 alarm during the descent of Eagle. Her code told the computer, when overloaded, drop low-priority tasks and protect the most critical functions. A design decision made years before the mission, during long working days and nights in a Cambridge, Massachusetts office, by a woman who had helped invent the field of software engineering and who named it herself, because no such field officially existed when she started. That decision saved the landing. John Houbolt. He was an aerospace engineer at NASA Langley who, in the early 1960s, argued persistently and against strong institutional opposition for a mission architecture called Lunar Orbit Rendezvous. The competing plans at the time called for either a direct ascent, flying a single enormous spacecraft directly from Earth to the lunar surface and back, or an Earth orbit rendezvous, which would have assembled the spacecraft in Earth orbit before heading to the Moon. Hobart argued that neither was as efficient as lunar orbit rendezvous. His approach, which eventually became the architecture of Apollo: go to the Moon with a spacecraft designed to stay in orbit. Take a small, purpose-built lander down to the surface. Come back up and reconnect. His bosses dismissed his idea repeatedly. He wrote a private letter directly to a NASA administrator, bypassing the chain of command in a way that could have ended his career, and made the case one more time. Eventually, the program adopted his approach. Without Hobart's architecture, Apollo 11, as it happened, could not have happened. Frances Poppy Northcutt. She was a TRW engineer who became, in 1968, the first woman to work in NASA's mission control as a technical support member. She worked on the return to Earth trajectory analysis for the Apollo missions, ensuring that if anything went wrong, the spacecraft could use the Moon's gravity to slingshot itself back toward Earth on a free return trajectory. That capability, which she helped develop and verify, became critical on Apollo 13. 400,000 people. Seamstresses, welders, mathematicians, machinists, propulsion engineers, test pilots, quality control inspectors, janitors who kept the clean rooms clean, security guards who checked badges at 2 in the morning. When Armstrong set foot on the Moon, it was the footprint of 400,000 people. One small step. There is something interesting that happened to language after Apollo. The phrase, "the sky is the limit," began, imperceptibly, to sound inadequate. The sky was not the limit. They had gone past the sky and kept going. New phrases entered common usage. Launching as a metaphor for beginning something. Re-entry as a metaphor for returning to ordinary life after a transformative experience. Mission control as a metaphor for the place where important decisions get made. Countdown as a metaphor for any approaching deadline. The mission also changed the way scientists thought about the Earth. That photograph, Earthrise, taken by Bill Anders from Apollo 8, confirmed and amplified by the photographs taken from the lunar surface during Apollo 11, became one of the foundational images of the environmental movement. Senator Gaylord Nelson, who founded Earth Day in April of 1970, cited the view of Earth from space as a key inspiration. To see your planet from outside it, without borders, without the categories by which humans had divided it for millennia, was to understand in a new way that it was one thing. One fragile, beautiful, irreplaceable thing. There is something worth pausing on. The computer that guided Apollo 11. Because it tells you something about what humans are capable of when the problem is clear enough and the stakes are high enough. The Apollo guidance computer was designed and built by MIT's Instrumentation Laboratory in the early 1960s. It weighed 70 pounds. It had 4,000 words of erasable memory, what we would call RAM today, and a read-only memory of 36,000 words. To give that some context, the phone in your pocket likely has several billion bytes of storage. The Apollo guidance computer had approximately 4,000 bytes of working memory. It ran at roughly 1 megahertz, a millionth of the processing speed of even a modest, modern laptop. And it landed human beings on the moon. The reason it could do this with so little is that every single operation was optimized to an extreme degree. The software team, led by Margaret Hamilton, spent years writing and refining code that was leaner and more efficient than almost anything that had been written before. Every routine was stripped of anything unnecessary. Every calculation used the minimum possible operations. Priorities were assigned to every task so that when the computer was overloaded, as it was during the descent, triggering the 1202 alarm, it knew exactly what to keep running and what to discard. The astronauts interacted with the computer through a device called the DSKY, display and keyboard. It had a numeric keypad, a row of warning lights, and a small display of numbers. No screen, no graphics, no mouse, just numbers. The astronauts communicated with the computer by entering 2-digit verb codes and 2-digit noun codes. Verb 37, noun 00. Verb 16, noun 68. A language of numbers, cold and precise, and completely adequate for the task. The integrated circuits that powered the Apollo guidance computer, the silicon chips that for the first time replaced individual transistors in a flight computer, were so new that the Apollo program consumed a substantial fraction of all the integrated circuits being manufactured in the United States at the time. The investment in that technology and the demand it created for scale is one of the reasons integrated circuits became cheap enough to put in everything, eventually including the device you're probably listening to this on right now. The modern world, in a small but real way, runs on infrastructure that Apollo helped build. Let's go back for a moment to the night before the launch. July 15th, 1969. The launch was scheduled for the morning. Across the country and across the world, people were aware of what was coming. In the days leading up to the launch, the area around Kennedy Space Center in Florida had been filling. Campsites and motels and parking lots and open fields. Cars pulled off highways. People who had driven for days to be within range of the sound and the light. That night, around 100 campfires spread across the flat Florida landscape. People who didn't know each other talked about what tomorrow might mean. Old men who had been born before the Wright brothers flew. Children who had never lived in a world without the space program. People who worked in factories that had built parts no one had told them what they were for, only that they had to be perfect. Reporters who had covered the whole program from the beginning and who were, quietly, frightened by what they'd seen go wrong along the way. Scientists who had spent their careers preparing for this night and who now found, staring up at the actual moon in the actual sky, that they felt something they hadn't expected to feel. Something close to awe. The moon was in the sky that night, which it sometimes is and sometimes isn't, depending on the lunar phase. You could look at it and look at the rocket on the pad, lit up in the distance by enormous floodlights, and understand the relationship between them in a way that was almost too large to hold in your mind. That pale disk. That machine. Those 3 sleeping men, or trying to sleep, in a crew quarters building a few miles away. One of the people at the launch site that night was the science fiction writer Isaac Asimov. He later wrote about standing in the dark with the crowd and the insects and the distant lights and feeling, for the first time in his life, that something he had spent his career imagining on the page was actually happening. I believed in it, he wrote. But I didn't know until that night that I believed in it. That distinction matters. There is knowing something, and there is knowing it. Standing on the Florida coast in the dark with the smell of the warm night and the sound of water, and that thing on the pad getting ready to do what it was going to do, that was knowing it. Armstrong, trying to sleep in the crew quarters, later said he was not especially anxious. He had done everything he could do. The machine had been checked and rechecked and checked again. The trajectory had been calculated and verified. The training had been exhaustive. What remained was the execution. He was good at execution. He slept. Let me tell you more about the spacesuits, because they deserve more than passing mention. A spacesuit is not merely clothing. It is a pressurized vessel, a thermal regulation system, a life support interface, a communication system, and a radiation shield, all in one garment that a human being has to be able to move in. The challenge of the spacesuit is this: to maintain pressure inside a flexible container. When you pressurize a flexible tube or balloon, it tends to stiffen and resist bending. A pressurized suit wants to be a rigid shape. It doesn't want to bend at the knee or the elbow or the hip. The engineering of a spacesuit is largely the engineering of fighting this tendency, using convoluted joints and carefully shaped gas bladders that maintain pressure while still allowing motion. The Apollo A7L suit, worn by Armstrong and Aldrin on the lunar surface, was the result of years of development and several predecessor designs. It had a liquid cooling garment worn next to the skin, a mesh of fine tubing carrying chilled water to carry away the body heat generated by physical work. Without this, a person in a sealed suit doing physical work on the lunar surface would overheat in minutes. The outer layer was Teflon-coated beta cloth, a fiberglass fabric with a melting point high enough to resist the thermal environment of space. The helmet was polycarbonate, the same material in most modern safety glasses, with a gold-tinted visor that reduced sunlight to a manageable level while allowing the astronaut to see clearly. The gloves were perhaps the hardest part to design. You need your hands to work. You need to be able to feel what you're doing. You need dexterity. but the gloves had to maintain pressure, and pressure in a glove is the enemy of dexterity. The solution was a rubber pressure glove worn inside a fabric outer glove with fingertips made of a slightly more flexible silicone that allowed some tactile feedback. After extended use in pressure, the gloves caused a particular problem. Because the nails press against the inside of the fingertips in a pressurized environment, astronauts who did extensive EVA work sometimes lost their fingernails. They would sacrifice them knowingly in preparation for a mission. The things people gave for this. The suit weighed, with the portable life support system, approximately 210 pounds on Earth. On the Moon, in 1/6 gravity, it weighed about 35 pounds. Still not light, but manageable. Armstrong and Aldrin moved in them across the lunar surface for 2.5 hours, collecting samples, deploying instruments, taking photographs, moving with the unhurried, loping grace of people who have practiced this and trust their equipment and know that panic is the only real enemy. Two human beings, wrapped in the finest engineering of their civilization, standing on a dead world 238,000 miles from home, working. There is something that happened during the time Armstrong and Aldrin were on the surface that is not always mentioned in the official accounts. Shortly after landing, while the post-landing checklist was still being completed and before the decision was made to skip the rest period, Buzz Aldrin asked Mission Control for a few minutes of quiet. Then he did something he had been planning privately for months. He was an elder in his Presbyterian church in Houston. He had asked his pastor to help him prepare a small communion kit, a tiny chalice, a miniature container of wine, a small wafer. He poured the wine into the chalice in the 1/6 gravity of the Moon. He watched it curl slowly around the inside of the vessel in the unfamiliar gravity. He read a passage from the Gospel of John, silently, to himself. And he took communion on the Moon. He later said he had thought of it as the first liquid ever poured on another world, the first food eaten there. NASA, concerned about religious controversy, Madeleine Murray O'Hair had sued NASA over a Bible reading during Apollo 8, asked Aldrin not to broadcast the ceremony. He honored that request. But he didn't stop the ceremony. It happened in silence, in the lunar module, on the Sea of Tranquility. A private moment of meaning in the most improbable location in human history. Aldrin later said he wished he had chosen something more universally human. He meant well by it. He was drawing on the deepest available language of meaning that he had. And what he was trying to express with it, the sense of being somewhere so strange and so beyond the ordinary, that some marking was required, some acknowledgement that this moment was different from all other moments. That impulse was universal, even if the specific form was not. Every culture that has ever crossed a threshold it didn't know how to describe has reached for the most profound available gesture. There is a small but persistent group of people who believe the moon landings were faked. This is worth addressing calmly and without contempt. the moon landings were not faked. Here is some of the evidence. The retroreflectors. As mentioned, laser retroreflectors placed on the lunar surface during the Apollo missions are still in active scientific use today. You can bounce a laser off them from Earth and receive the reflected pulse back. Before the Apollo missions, there were no retroreflectors on the moon. After them, there were. This is measurable and repeatable by any sufficiently equipped observatory on Earth. The rocks. The lunar samples returned by Apollo have been analyzed by thousands of scientists in dozens of countries, including by scientists from the Soviet Union, the very country most motivated to expose any deception. The rocks are unambiguously of extraterrestrial origin, with isotopic ratios and mineral compositions that cannot be replicated in any terrestrial geological process, and that match rocks returned by Soviet robotic sample return missions and found in lunar meteorites. The tracking data. Multiple independent tracking stations around the world, including those operated by other countries, tracked the Apollo spacecraft on their trajectories throughout the missions. The Soviet tracking network. Again, the most motivated possible skeptics tracked Apollo 11 from launch to splashdown. The 400,000 people. The idea that a conspiracy involving 400,000 workers, thousands of contractors across dozens of countries, and hundreds of tracking stations could have been maintained for over 50 years without a single verifiable confession is not consistent with anything we know about human organizations or human nature. The moon landings happened. 12 human beings walked on the surface of the moon between July of 1969 and December of 1972. This is among the best documented events in human history. Apollo 11 was not the last moon landing. Between 1969 and 1972, 5 more Apollo missions successfully landed on the moon. Apollo 12, in November of 1969, landed within walking distance of an earlier unmanned probe called Surveyor 3 and brought pieces of it back to Earth for study, having been on the moon for 2 years and 8 months. Apollo 14, in February of 1971, was the mission that saw astronaut Alan Shepard, the first American in space, bring a golf club head that he attached to a sample collection tool and hit 2 golf balls on the lunar surface. He said one of them went miles and miles and miles. It probably went a few hundred yards. In the moon's gravity and vacuum, that's still a respectable shot. Apollo 15, 16, and 17 brought a lunar rover, an electric 4-wheeled vehicle that let astronauts explore much wider areas of the surface. Apollo 17, in December of 1972, was the last. Astronaut Gene Cernan was the final person to walk on the moon. Before climbing the ladder for the last time, he stood on the surface and spoke. He said, "As I take man's last step from the surface, back home for some time to come, but we believe not too long into the future, I'd like to just say what I believe history will record, that America's challenge of today has forged man's destiny of tomorrow. And, as we leave the moon at Taurus Litro, we leave as we came, and, God willing, as we shall return, with peace and hope for all mankind. He climbed the ladder. The hatch closed. The ascent engine fired. And the last human beings left the moon on the 14th of December, 1972. 50 years have passed since anyone has stood on another world. There is a question, quiet but persistent, that runs through any honest reckoning with Apollo 11. What was it for? Not in the narrow, competitive sense of beat the Soviets. In the larger sense, what was it for? Some would say it was for science. And it was. The rocks, the seismometers, the retroreflectors, the mapping of the lunar surface, all of it yielded knowledge that continues to inform our understanding of the solar system and of Earth itself. Some would say it was for technology. And it was. The computing advances, the materials, science, the miniaturization, the communication systems, the understanding of human physiology in extreme environments, all of it fed back into the world and changed what was possible. Some would say it was for inspiration. And it was. A generation of scientists and engineers and doctors and artists traced their path to where they ended up, back to a night when they were young and they watched a human being walk on the moon, and decided, in the most private and inarticulate part of themselves, that they wanted to be part of something that big. But perhaps the deepest answer is something harder to name. When Armstrong stood on the surface of the Sea of Tranquility and looked up at the Earth, he saw everything. Every person who had ever lived, every city ever built, every ocean ever crossed, every war ever fought, every love ever felt, every poem ever written, every dream ever dreamed. All of it, small and blue and radiant, hanging in an immensity so vast that the mind cannot hold it. And from that distance, from 238,000 miles away in the silence of another world, it didn't look divided. It didn't look like it was at war with itself. It looked like one thing. One fragile, luminous, improbable, extraordinary thing. Maybe that is what it was for. To give us that view. To remind us, from outside, what we are when we're not busy forgetting. You have been lying still for a long time now. Or perhaps you fell asleep somewhere in the Sea of Tranquility, in the soft grey dust of another world, and these words have been carrying you the whole way home. That would be exactly right. I want to leave you with one small, quiet thing. On the plaque fixed to the descent stage of Eagle, the plaque that is still on the moon right now, at this moment as you lie here, in the dark, on the plain of the Sea of Tranquility, there are 4 words that stand alone at the end. We came in peace. For all mankind. Not for America. Not for the 1960s. Not for the astronauts or the engineers or the politicians or the people who funded it. For all mankind. And that means you. It was done for you. Whatever your name is, wherever you are, in whatever bed or room or corner of the world you occupy tonight. You are part of the mankind that they came in peace for. You are part of the species that looked at the moon for 200,000 years, and then, one summer, actually went. You are part of the species that looked at the moon for 200,000 years, and then, one summer, actually went. That is something. That is, actually, extraordinary. People sometimes ask what space sounds like. The answer is, technically, nothing. Sound requires a medium to travel through. Sound is a pressure wave, alternating regions of compression and rarefaction moving through air, or water, or any material that can be compressed. In the vacuum of space, there is no medium, no molecules to carry the wave. So the answer is silence. Absolute silence. But the experience of the astronauts inside their spacecraft was far from silent. The spacecraft itself was full of noise. The hum of the environmental control systems, the fans circulating air, the subtle clicks of the guidance system, the crackle of the radio, the occasional thump and hiss of the reaction control system, thrusters firing to orient the spacecraft. Space, from inside a spacecraft, sounds like being inside a very large, very sophisticated piece of machinery. It sounds like purpose. On the lunar surface, inside their suits, Armstrong and Aldrin heard the sound of their own breathing, amplified slightly by the enclosed space of the helmet. The steady, rhythmic in and out that marks all living things. Inhale. Exhale. Against the absolute silence of the moon outside their suits, the sound of their breathing was the only biological sound anywhere in 238,000 miles. The only sound of life. They also heard, through the suit material, their own footsteps. Not the crunch of Earth footsteps. A softer, muted sensation, transmitted not through air, but through the suit itself, through the boot, through the soul. A feeling more than a sound. The sensation of pressing down into a surface that no human foot had ever touched, and giving it, very slightly, an impression. The Apollo program ended in 1972. It ended because of money, and because of politics, and because the race was over and had been won, and because 3 missions, Apollo 18, 19, and 20, were cancelled before they flew. The hardware for those missions was built. It sits in museums today. Saturn V rockets. Complete, flight-ready machines that could have taken human beings to the moon, lying on their sides in temperature-controlled buildings, never to fly. This fact has a particular quality to it that is hard to name. Something between waste and monument. After Apollo, NASA flew the Space Shuttle program from 1981 to 2011. A remarkable achievement in its own right, providing routine access to low Earth orbit and enabling the construction of the International Space Station. But low Earth orbit is not the Moon. Low Earth orbit is, in cosmic terms, just barely above the surface. The International Space Station orbits at about 250 miles altitude. The Moon is 238,000 miles away. The space station is 100 feet off the ground. The Moon is the horizon. No human being has been farther than a few hundred miles from the surface of Earth since the last Apollo astronauts came home in December of 1972. Half a century. There are people alive today who watched Apollo 11 on television as children, who are now grandparents, and who have not in their lifetime seen a human being travel farther than low orbit. Gene Cernan, the last man on the Moon, died in 2017. He had been asked in interview after interview over the years what it felt like to be the last. He always said the same thing. He was not proud of it. He did not want to be the last. He believed someone would follow him, and that the weight of decades was an embarrassment, a squandering of what had been proven possible. "We should be on Mars by now," he said more than once. But the story is not over. In 2022, for the first time since the final Apollo mission, a rocket capable of reaching the Moon flew again. The Space Launch System, NASA's new heavy-lift rocket, the most powerful rocket flown since the Saturn V, carried the uncrewed Orion spacecraft around the Moon and back. Artemis I, named for the twin sister of Apollo in Greek mythology. The crewed missions that will follow are intended to return human beings to the lunar surface, including, for the first time, a woman and a person of color. The landing site being considered is near the south pole of the Moon, where permanently shadowed craters may contain water ice. Ice that has been sitting in the cold and the dark for billions of years, delivered by comets and preserved in the eternal shadow of crater walls that have never seen sunlight. Water ice means oxygen when you break it down. It means hydrogen for fuel. It means, potentially, a way to build a sustainable human presence on the Moon, without having to bring everything from Earth. Private companies are also building their own spacecraft to go to the Moon. The lunar surface, which had only human visitors for a few days in the early 1970s, may within this decade have multiple active landing sites, multiple spacecraft, multiple nations and organizations present. The Sea of Tranquility is a protected site. The United States passed legislation designating the Apollo landing sites as historically significant, intended to preserve them. There are discussions at international levels about how to protect the boot prints, the equipment, the plaque. How to ensure that the first marks humanity made on another world are not accidentally disturbed by the second wave of visitors. It is a strange and beautiful problem to have. Tonight, wherever you are, if you were to go outside and look up, you would see the moon in whatever phase it happens to be in. Maybe full, brilliant and round, casting enough light to read by on a clear night. Maybe crescent, a thin curve of silver against the dark. Maybe somewhere in between. It might be hidden behind clouds. It might be below the horizon. But it's there. It's always there. And somewhere on that disk, in the dark grey expanse of the Sea of Tranquility, there is a small collection of objects that represent the single greatest act of exploration in the recorded history of our species. A plaque, a flag, a retroreflector, boot prints, bags of discarded equipment, the descent stage of a spacecraft called Eagle. When you look at the moon, you are looking at history. The oldest, most uneroded, most perfectly preserved history that exists. Older than the pyramids by 4 billion years on the far side of the crater walls. And newer than almost any human monument in the small patch of ground near the equator's edge, where two men stood in the summer of 1969 and looked up at the world they'd come from. There is something about the moon's distance that keeps it simultaneously close and unreachable. 238,000 miles. It sounds like a lot. It is a lot by any human standard. And yet, in the scale of the solar system, the moon is right here. The nearest planet, Mars, at its closest approach, is about 140 times farther away. The nearest star is 265,000 times farther. The edge of the observable universe is roughly 30 billion trillion times farther. The moon is, by cosmic standards, right next door. A neighbor. Our first destination beyond ourselves. There is a particular quality to knowledge that has settled into feeling. When you stop holding information at arm's length, as data to be processed, and let it become something you carry in your body, that is when understanding begins. Everything we have talked about tonight can be held that way. The men in their suits on the grey plain, the sound of their breathing, the print of a boot in fine dust, the plaque in the airless cold, the earth as a marble in black space, the retroreflector waiting patiently for a laser from a French observatory. 400,000 people who built the thing that made it possible. The seamstress whose careful stitches held a boundary between life and vacuum. The 26-year-old in mission control with his handwritten cheat sheet. The woman who invented software engineering so a computer with 4,000 bytes of memory could land a spacecraft on another world. The 3 men who did it. And the 600 million people who watched. And the rest of humanity who didn't watch, but who lived in a world that was never quite the same after it happened. You are one of the people who came after. You grew up in a world where it is simply true that human beings have stood on the moon. You take it in without any sense of how recently impossible it was. How audacious. How terrifying. How close to not working. Let the weight of it settle in now. Not as drama. As wonder. As quiet, held wonder. The kind that doesn't need to shout. The kind that just rests in you, warm and still, while your body sinks a little deeper into wherever you're lying, and your thoughts thin out, and the day releases you. The dark between the stars is something that most people don't think about very often. We look at a night sky and we see the stars, the bright points that draw the eye. But most of what's up there is the dark between them. The vast, interconnected darkness that fills 99.99% of the volume of space. And yet that darkness is not empty. Space is threaded with magnetic fields. With the slow drift of cosmic rays, high-energy particles flung out from supernovae and active galaxies, crossing millions of light years to pass through your body right now, as you lie there, at a rate of roughly 1 per second. You are being permeated by the universe at this moment. Particles that have traveled for millions of years from the heart of dead stars are passing through you as you breathe. Space is filled with the cosmic microwave background radiation, the afterglow of the Big Bang, stretched and cooled over nearly 14 billion years to microwave frequencies, filling every corner of the universe with a whisper of warmth from the moment of creation. If you could tune to the right frequency, you would hear it as a soft hiss, the background noise of the universe. The astronauts on Apollo 11, passing through this radiation on their way to the moon, sometimes reported seeing flashes of light when their eyes were closed. These were cosmic ray particles striking the vitreous humor of their eyes directly, without passing through the atmosphere that normally shields us on Earth. They were seeing the universe with their eyes closed, in the dark of their own skulls. Flashes from particles that had been traveling for millions of years, arriving at that exact moment, in the eyes of 3 human beings in a small spacecraft between the Earth and the Moon. This is the universe. It does not keep a distance from you. It passes through. Anatomically modern humans have existed for approximately 300,000 years. For the first 280,000 of those years, the moon was simply there, a light in the night sky, a keeper of tides, a cycle by which months were measured, something to navigate by, something to tell stories about, something to worship or fear or simply use as a calendar. In all those years, no one knew what it was made of. No one knew how it formed. No one knew that its surface was covered in a layer of fine dust from billions of years of micrometeorite bombardment, or that it was slowly drifting away from Earth, or that its craters were impact scars from the violent early history of the solar system. They only knew what they could see. A light. A pattern. A presence. And then, in the span of a single human lifetime, all of that changed. From the first aircraft in 1903 to the first landing on the moon in 1969 was 66 years. A single human lifetime. A child born the year the Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk could have been 66 years old and watched Armstrong step off the ladder. The span of a single life. From a 12-second hop off a sand dune in North Carolina to footprints on the moon. This is who we are. This is what we are capable of when we decide something matters enough. When we commit to it, not with words, but with work, year after year, in the cold fluorescent light of laboratories and factories and mission control rooms, at 2 in the morning. With the careful hands of seamstresses and the patient arithmetic of mathematicians and the quiet tenacity of engineers who check the same calculation for the 100th time, because the 101st might be the one that finds the error. This is who we are. The moon is in the sky tonight, or it will be tomorrow, or the night after. In the sea of tranquility, in the stillness of the vacuum, the boot prints are still there. The plaque is still there. The retroreflectors wait, patient and precise, for the next laser pulse to arrive from Earth. The flag lies on its side, caught in the exhaust of the ascent engine all those years ago. And somewhere, in an uncatalogued crater on the near side, the Eagle's ascent stage rests where it fell. Quiet. Cold. Preserved. A relic of the day our species decided to go somewhere nobody had ever been, and went. Let all of that settle now. Let the weight of it settle the way the lunar dust settled after the Eagle lifted off. Slowly, without wind to carry it, each particle falling back to the surface in the quiet and the cold and the dark. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts drift and thin. You have traveled a long way tonight. Farther than most people go in a lifetime. 238,000 miles. 8 days. 3 men. 400,000 workers. 1 small step. 1 quiet world in a dark sky. You are back now. Safe. Home. Close your eyes. Let the quiet of the sea of tranquility be yours for a little while. You have earned it. Good night.